Randomized block experiments. What is a randomized block experiment and when is it used? A randomized block experiment is an observation that breaks the experimental subjects into groups or blocks based on a shared factor that affects the outcome of the experiment. When simple random sampling does not give us enough control, we use randomized blocks to decrease the likelihood of our observation being influenced by the outlying factor. We then use random sampling within each block to get an accurate representation. We can see a visual depiction of this in the next figure. As you can see, we have some randomized blocks with random sampling of our variables in each. This setup is the basic foundation for all random block experiments. Now, to put this method to use in a real-life engineering scenario, we can imagine we are testing the hardness of different materials among separate trials. Hardness changes with different temperatures, so taking simple random samples of each material allows for the possibility of sampling in different climates, and therefore receiving different results. This wouldn't give us an accurate representation of the material's overall hardness. However, we can use randomized blocks to combat this. Here we are grouping our materials in low, medium, and high temperature blocks. We can then randomly sample our 3 materials within each block and each trial to more accurately determine the hardness of each. This also gives us a layout that is very close to our previous setup. Another example of the same scenario is shown in this next slide. Here we are again testing for the hardness of different materials in different temperature zones. This time, however, we are only conducting one trial and are testing more materials. The same problem with simple random sampling also persists, so we are again blocking by temperature. This again allows us to determine the hardness of each material in each temperature block to get a more accurate representation. This setup looks quite different than our last 2 examples, but still is an accurate depiction of randomized blocks. Randomized blocks are an extremely useful tool in experimentation, and as we have seen, can be used in more than one way to fit our specific needs. This is exceptionally important in engineering, where we must take into account all factors that can influence our outcomes. Randomized block experiments allow us to be in control and be accurate, and that is definitely something to utilize.